Hi, I'm Carl Azus. Welcome to CNN 10, your 10-minute overview of world events. We begin this March 23rd in Australia, specifically its eastern state of New South Wales. It's the most populated state in the country with more than 8 million people. Many of them struggled with the record bushfire season that struck in 2019 and 2020. Now they're dealing with the opposite problem, record-breaking floods. More than 18,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Thousands more could be told to leave in the days ahead because increasing rainfall is in the forecast. Extreme weather like bushfires, floods, droughts, and storms, that's common in Australia. What caused this problem, according to the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, was the collision of two weather systems that brought tremendous amounts of rain to New South Wales. All along its eastern coast, from its northern border to its southern one, the state is under a flood watch. Homes have been destroyed, roads are underwater, rivers have burst their banks. An Australian meteorologist says since last Thursday, some areas have seen more than 3 feet of rain. That's 5 times what this region normally gets in the entire month of March, and another 2 to 4 inches of rainfall was possible by Tuesday night. The New South Wales State Emergency Service says it's responded to thousands of calls for help. Thousands of emergency workers and volunteers are on the ground assisting others, and the state's premier says the Australian military may be needed to help with the recovery. The government expects it'll take a massive effort to clean up once the waters subside. 10-second trivia. According to the United Nations, 31% of the Earth's land area is covered by what? Forests, deserts, lakes, or ice? Though deserts cover about a third of the land, forests cover just under that at 31%. Deforestation and reforestation are next today. The major cause of forest reduction in South America is the intentional clearing of land. This can be done for wood, to expand cities or road projects, or to develop more farmland. The Atlantic Forest, which runs from northeast Brazil down the country's east coast into Paraguay and Argentina, covers only a fraction of the land it once had, but a conservationist is working to reconnect some of its fragments.
What I really love about being in the forest is seeing the size of the change we can really make. Is it really possible to bring out that forest back?
Laurie Cullen has dedicated his life to restoring the Atlantic forest in Brazil after witnessing the destruction of his birthplace.
The western São Paulo Atlantic Forest Range used to be a very, green, continuous, beautiful landscape. What used to be 100% of forest cover now is only 2%.
Decades of deforestation have led to a significant reduction of one of the world's most diverse habitats. All that remains of the forest are isolated fragments. This means many species are now under threat, as they no longer have the ability to disperse.
The wildlife, especially jaguars, pumas, ocelots, they are very isolated in small forest patches. They cannot see each other. That's when we start having problems of inbreeding depression that can kill the local population in a very short term.
Cullen and his team use a targeted approach to forest restoration, taking what's left of the fragments and planting in corridors. These proposed corridors aim to connect the fragments and act almost like an express highway for local species.
The dream map is putting priorities where the forest should really be, to make sure we put the right corridors in the right places.
To date, Cullen and his team have restored 3,000 hectares of forest and tell us they have already seen at least half of native species using them, including some animals at most risk of extinction.
Today, it's already possible to see the lion tamarins, the families of this little monkey, by themselves using some of the forest corridors that we have put back. If we just keep on going, the survival of this very endangered species will be okay in the long term.
Cullen is motivated by both the community and climate benefits to reforestation, but his accomplishments represent a transformation that is as much personal as it is philanthropic.
If you give an aspiring engineer enough PVC pipe, 2x4s, sandbags, and cinder blocks, and then you let him work for a few weeks, it's amazing what he can build. At least it is if he's Ben Tolliday, a Georgia student who constructed a thrill ride in his backyard. We don't know how much the materials cost, but we do know it works, and that his mother is proud, though she says she's looking forward to getting her yard back. It won't be to her amusement, and she will not find it thrilling if he dips, dives, turns, rolls out, and coasts off to college while leaving a construction project on track in her yard. He may ask, why wouldn't you want it? But if she's steeled in her determination not to have her yard marred by a twisted venture, she may not let that train leave the station until the coaster's cleared. Shout out to Antilles High School today. The Pirates are watching in Fort Buchanan, Puerto Rico. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'm Carl Azus for CNN. So there's no masking researchers' excitement. They describe the gold mask kind of like we describe Fridays. Aurum! What more could AU want? It's always fun for Alchemy to report on, and while it's probably a lot heavier than the plastic COVID masks we wear these days, it'd be fool's gold not to at least try it. I'm Carl Azus. Lehighton, Pennsylvania is where we're going for today's shout out. You could say we have heightened interest in Lehighton Area High School for their comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Carl Azus. What do the Ford Model A, the Duesenberg SSJ Speedster, and a Willys MB Jeep all have in common? If you said they're old, you're right. But there's something else that ties these iconic vehicles together, and it's related to our first topic today on CNN 10. That topic is computer chips. These cars ain't got them. Today's cars do, dozens of them. They're not just found in the touchscreen infotainment systems that replaced the buttons and switches you played with as a little kid. Keyless entry, engine operation, anti-lock brakes, automatic transmissions, airbag systems. All of these are controlled with semiconductors, computer chips. And one of the many strange ripple effects of the coronavirus pandemic is a global shortage of these chips. About 12% of them go to car makers, and the automotive industry is worth trillions of dollars worldwide. So if car makers can't get chips into their vehicles and then can't produce them as quickly as they used to, economic problems could result around the world. The makers of these semiconductors shut down temporarily because of the pandemic, but they're back up and running now. So you'd think that would have just caused a delay in the production of things that use them. But with more people spending more time at home last year, demand for computer chips went through the roof as consumers bought new computers, TVs, and game consoles. So now, car makers are having trouble getting the ones they need for new vehicles. Christy Lou Stout has more info on why the chips are down.
It's so easy to take them for granted. The tiny silicon-based semiconductors that fuel our modern lives, our smartphones, our laptops, and our cars. Now, the average car has between 50 to 150 chips that are used to monitor important engine and safety systems, along with GPS navigation or driver assistance when you try to parallel park. But when the pandemic hammered auto sales last year, top chip makers shifted capacity away from car makers to gadget makers, resulting in a critical shortage of car chips that's been called
10-second trivia. Which of these islands is the largest? Bahrain, Sri Lanka, Iceland, or Hispaniola? Of these options, Iceland, which compares in size to the U.S. state of Kentucky, is the largest.
What was surprising was the colors of the orange were much deeper than what you'd expect. So yeah, it's absolutely breathtaking.
We are just here to look at the people and see that everything is okay, and just watch out that the people don't go too close to the lava.
So it's quite an interesting eruption. It didn't really begin with a strong bang, but instead we've had this fantastic earthquake swarm with probably 50,000 earthquakes in a month. And so the magma had been gradually rising towards the surface and is now producing a relatively small eruption compared to the last one in Iceland.
Therapy dogs can be amazing companions. The American Kennel Club says they may help reduce people's anxiety and blood pressure, that they can help people cope with emotional and physical hardships. They're often used to help patients in hospital settings, but a medical center in Boston, Massachusetts has a completely different way of thinking when it comes to therapy dogs.
Dr. Spot, please report to the ER, stat. That's what they did at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston.
Test the robot actually in the emergency department.
With a computer tablet for a head, beaming the faces of ER doctors able to interact with patients from a COVID-safe distance, not to mention
cameras that could then also sense vital signs like heart rate, respiratory rate, oxygen levels.
But they weren't so much testing the robotics. They were more interested in whether patients would accept Dr. Spot. The Boston Dynamics RoboDog has been humanized through dance videos. And even pulling Santa's sleigh in an earlier version. The last time we recall a doctor having a robo-dog, Doctor Who did things like play chess with him.
Your move, Master.
I know it's my move. Don't flash your eyes at me.
Dr. Spot didn't flash his eyes at anyone, but would you want to see this? Charging at you when you're sick?
Well, I think that's exactly what we wanted to de-risk.
MIT assistant professor Giovanni Traverso says the RoboDog was spot on with the 40 patients they sicked him on.
The robot looks like a dog, and I think dogs too are endearing to many, and so actually the reception was very positive.
Unlike at a previous press demo, Professor Traverso says there were no accidents in the ER. Jeannie Mose, CNN, New York.
The hospital is doggedly determined to provide service. Is it warm and fuzzy? No. Will it therapize the patients and give them peace of mind? Some will say it's spot on. Some will say it's just what the doctor ordered. But critics might want someone to lift their spirits instead of just its leg, and they may say the whole hospital's going to the dogs. Hey, speaking of going places, we're going to the capital of Ghana today. In West Africa, the American International School is watching in the city of Accra. It's great to hear from you on YouTube. I'm Carl Azus for CNN. No large vessels can get around it. 8 tugboats have been working to free the Ever Given. It's reportedly damaged. Once the ship is cleared, it'll probably have to be towed for miles to the nearest port where it'll be unloaded and repaired. Meantime, the number of other ships that are waiting is growing. One official says as many as 100 of them could be lining up at opposite ends of the canal to get through. Some of these vessels are carrying oil from Oman, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the United States. That could disrupt supplies if the Ever Given isn't freed soon. How long will that take? An Egyptian official says a couple days at least, a week or more if things don't go well. And after it's moved, it'll probably take days to get maritime traffic back to its normal flow in the Suez Canal.
The Suez Canal is one of the world's most strategic waterways. A vital shipping route for over 150 years, transporting goods between Europe and Asia. An ambitious plan to modernise the canal brought Ajay Kumar Singh here in 2016.
We should have come to this place about 3 years back. The place has transformed in the last 3 years in terms of business, in terms of people, in terms of processes, but everything is revamped.
He runs the only privately managed port in Egypt, located just below the southern entrance of the Suez Canal.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you all?
From here, RJ has watched the area transform.
All good? What they've done is that they have expanded 35 kilometers of Suez Canal. That has doubled the ships passing through.
Capitalising on this increased traffic, a giant economic free zone is taking shape along the canal, attracting manufacturers and suppliers from all over the world. This vessel carried 60,000 tonnes of raw sugar from Brazil. It's for Safula Group, a Saudi-based industrial company which refines and packages the sugar right here at the port. It's then shipped back through the canal to customers all over the world. Because everything happens here, Safula cuts costs and saves time. DP World is expanding the port to accommodate the world's biggest ships, bringing its total investment here to $1.6 billion.
10-second trivia. The largest percentage of U.S. landfill waste comes from what material? Plastics, paper products, food, or yard trimmings? According to the Environmental Protection Agency, paper and paper products account for more than 23% of landfill waste. And food takes up the second largest slice of the landfill pie, accounting for about 21.5%. The COVID pandemic changed how Americans dine out, at least temporarily. Restaurant sales, especially in large cities, dropped when it came to in-person dining, but they rose for takeout. That means more disposable food containers were floating around. Companies like the one you're about to see that are working to develop alternatives to throwaway food containers. Deliver Zero is kind of like Grubhub, DoorDash, or Uber Eats, except the new company's drivers take your old containers away when they drop off the new ones. This does come at an additional cost for restaurants based on the amount of takeout food they sell. How does this compare with what other delivery services charge?
Ordering Spartan combos, spinach pies, swohojatiki.
Like a lot of New Yorkers, I eat a lot of takeout. When you get takeout, after your meal, you have tons and tons of garbage. New York City alone goes through billions of single-use disposables just in the restaurant industry. And I wanted to solve that problem. My name is Adam Farbiage. I'm one of the co-founders of Deliver Zero. Deliver Zero is a food ordering service. We provide restaurants with reusable takeout containers. Deliver Zero started in Park Slope, Brooklyn with 5 restaurants in late 2019. When you order food through Deliver Zero, you get your food in these reusable containers. The restaurant tells us how many of our Deliver Zero boxes are going out, and the customer has these boxes. The customer then returns them. They can return them to the next delivery courier. They can return them by walking back to a Deliver Zero restaurant and handing them in. If the customer returns them within 6 weeks, there's no extra cost for the customer. And eventually, if they don't return them after 6 weeks and a little bit of a grace period, they're charged $3.25 per box. That restaurant will then wash the containers, add them to their supply, add them to their inventory, and reuse them for the next order.
As a restaurant owner, we save money where we don't have to use my containers. Seamless and Grubhub, yeah, they take a big chunk, 20% compared to Delivery Zero. They take about 10%.
New Deliver Zero.
Like all those other services, we provide a tablet to the restaurant where the orders show up and say, hey, make this food. The experience for the restaurant and for the customer is really identical. In the next 18 months, we'd like to have many, many, many more restaurants in New York. We're going to bring Deliver Zero to Los Angeles. We also have a partner who's opening Deliver Zero in Amsterdam. 5 years, we view this as a much, much bigger program. Once you start thinking about single use, you will see single use everywhere. You have to start asking, why isn't the problem being solved everywhere? This is the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is a network. We view this network as encompassing all foods. Foods that might you get at the grocery store, or the deli, or the food vendor who's selling things out of a cart. You just know in your heart of hearts that it is a foolish thing that we're doing as a society to make all this stuff just to throw it away. It's silly. And I want my kids to live in a world where that doesn't happen anymore.
Turns out out the phrase, "music soothes the savage beast," is not an exact quote. That's how many people know the line, which came from a play written in 1697 by William Congreve. But even though the words in the modern phrase are a little bit different, they apply exactly to what's been going on at a zoo in Colombia. So before we go today, sit back, relax, and take a listen. They may be thinking, please don't stop the music. It may be Mozartistic music to their ears. But watch out if the lions join in the chorus and say, "If music be the food of love, play on," because that could be a sour note that signals treble, and you'll want to jump Bach and keep your composure if you're close to the clef of their enclosure when the savage beasts decide it's feeding time. You just never know what they'll zoo. I know at the students of Axtell High School Zoo, they subscribe and comment on our YouTube channel, which is the only place we look for the shout-out schools we mentioned, like today's from Axtell, Kansas. I'm Carl Azuz. Past and present lift off together as we get off the ground with a story about flight. You know what that means? Flight days are awesome. I'm Carl Azuz for CNN 10. Right now, NASA has several active missions to Mars, orbiting the planet, observing the planet, roving the planet. The most recent arrival is the $2.7 billion Perseverance mission. It's got a drone helicopter on board that's carrying a piece of human history. First, the helicopter. It's called Ingenuity. It's about 2.5 feet tall, weighs 4 pounds, and cost $23 million to develop. It's not carrying any scientific instruments. Ingenuity's purpose is to see if powered helicopter flight is possible on the Red Planet. And NASA says it won't do that until at least April 8th because the chopper has to undergo a series of tests before it can try to lift off. If that works though, besides making history, the drone is also carrying it. It's got a tiny piece of the Wright Flyer aboard. This is the first powered and controlled airplane that people ever built. In 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright flew 4 separate flights on Flyer 1 near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. In contrast to the small Ingenuity drone, the Wright Flyer had a wingspan of more than 40 feet and a length of more than 21 feet. It was built from wood, canvas, aluminum, steel, and iron, and it weighed 605 pounds. As a sort of tribute to that flight, scientists took a bit of fabric that covered the Wright Flyer's wings, a small piece the size of a postage stamp, and attached it to a cable underneath the Ingenuity drone's solar panel. It's not the first time NASA has done this for a space flight. In 1969, a piece of the Wright Flyer's wing fabric and a splinter of wood from the historic aircraft was traveling aboard the Apollo 11 mission when it flew to the moon and back. 10-second trivia. What is the meaning of the Russian word Sputnik? Traveling companion, new dawn, distant observer, or next frontier? Sputnik, the name of a Soviet satellite and a Russian vaccine, means traveling companion. Since Sputnik 1 launched in 1957, people have been putting satellites, rockets, and stations into space. And it's getting crowded up there with the stuff we use and the stuff we don't. The European Space Agency estimates that there are more than 9,000 tons of man-made materials in orbit. That's the weight of 720 school buses driving around over our heads. And a new spacecraft launched over the weekend, along with its satellite, added about 423 pounds to that. But this mission's a little bit different. It's an attempt to demonstrate a way to potentially clean up space junk. The plan is for the spacecraft and satellite to separate, then reattach using magnets, then head back toward Earth to burn up in its atmosphere. Sounds simple, but it'll take months to accomplish. If it works though, the demo flight could set the stage for a new space junk cleanup.
The more we rocket into the heavens,
3, 2, 1, liftoff.
The more junk and debris we leave behind, making it more dangerous for our spaceships and our satellites to move around. The good news, we can clean it up. In the heart of Tokyo, just a few miles away from this park, on a quiet street, one company is trying to make space a little safer by making it a little cleaner. Imagine space for a second. It looks something like this, right? Not quite. According to space whizzes like this guy, hi Tim, this is more like it. A world surrounded by broken satellites, old rockets and spaceship fragments, and, well, just junk.
You wouldn't believe there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of space debris up there.
Over 170 million pieces, according to some estimates. Some are big, others small. Most are really small.
The small one is like a paint flecks.
But don't let size fool you. In space, the smallest thing can have a catastrophic impact. Those flecks move at an average of 40,000 kilometers an hour, and when they hit with the force of a hand grenade. Imagine that times 170 million. Naoko Yamazaki, Japan's second female astronaut, has seen the impact of this stuff firsthand.
If the space debris size is bigger than 1 centimeter,
less than a dime,
it will go through the structure, so it is a risk.
That means dime-sized debris could destroy a spaceship. But junk isn't just a problem for astronauts. It impacts everyone on Earth too. Intelligence gathering, electric grids. Just look at the GPS on your phone. That's why Mickey wants to make space clean again.
それをきれいにどんどん宇宙をきれいにしていかないと我々の生活が脅威となっている存在なんです。
Step 1. Map the mess. Agencies like NASA track the big trash, but right now no one's really looking out for the small pieces.
地球から観測ができなくて、どこにどれぐらいのサイズのデブリがあるのかっていうのが分かってない。
While Satellite 1 maps the small stuff, Satellite 2, nicknamed ELSA-D, will sweep up the big stuff.
今考えているのは磁石。
Really? Just magnets? Mickey's team will launch the satellite as close to the selected piece of junk as possible. Special cameras and sensors will get even closer, and magnets will do the rest. Then it'll be all programmed to come back to Earth where it will burn up on re-entry. If all goes according to plan, Astroscale will send the first demo sweeper up in 2019. And from there, companies can hire their own ELSA to sweep up whatever might be in their way. Big international agencies like the European Space Agency have also started developing ideas to clean up space. But Astroscale is the world's first private company giving it a try because it believes we will become ever more dependent on space.
Someday, people will probably go to Mars or more farther place.
And let's not forget space tourism.
But if you want to go to the farther beyond the Earth, we have to clear that crowded area to minimize the risk.
Good luck.